Multiverse stories seem to be the cool new thing, cinematically speaking. Being the center of the current MCU saga, the topic is getting a lot of attention. This phase of the MCU has gotten a lot of criticism for feeling much less connected than previous phases, and that has drawn a big red target on the concept of multiverse storytelling. But I don't think it's the fault of the concept itself, rather the use. We've had incredible movies and shows that revolve around or lean into the multiverse for its storytelling, like Into and Across the Spider-Verse, Everything Everywhere All at Once, and of course, the topic of this video, Invincible. This video isn't some excuse to blindly hate on the MCU, I just really do believe they can tell much better stories within the context, especially considering Into the Spider-Verse did it with existing MCU characters. I want to try and put into words why Invincible's multiverse plot worked for me whilst most of the MCU stuff has fallen flat. So firstly, we must discuss nostalgia versus original characters. I went to see Spider-Man No Way Home opening day with a few friends, and of course having grown up with Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield assuming the role, I was hyped. And it was an insanely unique experience to be in a theater filled with people that share that same nostalgia. The problem is the movie doesn't work without that nostalgia. If you replaced the actors of not only the Spider-Men, but also the villains, it wouldn't work. The movie banks on those reveals. It almost feels awkward on a rewatch because you can feel the moments that were orchestrated for a crowd reaction. In a similar vein, I feel like this is also the reason that the recent MCU isn't resonating as much with general audiences as earlier phases. It banks on them also having watched the movies from decades ago, bringing back actors to reprise roles, rather than exploring interesting concepts revolving around similar characters with different backstories or events that shaped who they are. For example, Into and Across the Spider-Verse has an insanely stacked cast of original characters that you come to love through the merit of these movies alone. I get that these characters have been in other media throughout the years, but I don't think that's the same thing as going to a movie purely because of the actor playing the character. The multiverse aspect of No Way Home feels like it overshadows MCU Spider-Man's story for the spectacle and marketability of actors reprising roles. It feels like the death of Aunt May is less impactful because he doesn't have to deal with it himself. You're hit with this emotional scene just to go straight back to Toby and Andrew. Jump out of your seat, woo! I don't know, maybe I'm a little biased as I wanted a more grounded, street-level MCU Spider-Man story, like many do. Especially after the death of Iron Man. This man has always had some sort of mentor or older authority figure. I feel like the death of his auntie should have been a bit more personal of a story rather than being linked to a multiverse nostalgia fest. So now is when I finally talk about Outside of its own comic book, Invincible doesn't have anything to draw from. There's no nostalgia that can be exploited to get more eyes on the show. So when it comes to the multiverse plot, they need to just tell a compelling story. And I think they do that, to a point where the more you think about it, the more interesting it becomes. Invincible's multiverse plot is driven by the character Angstrom Levy, who can make portals between different dimensions, but only in the same spot he makes that portal. He is the anchor of the multiverse plot. He's already an interesting character as he starts out with seemingly altruistic goals, wanting to combine his collective memory from multiple dimensions into one brain so he can help all the dimensions with his powers. Invincible gets involved and blamed when it all inevitably goes wrong. Angstrom now has the collective memories of his other selves, but he's gone a little crazy. The main thing to note is that within most of those memories he now shares, Invincible is a villain. He joins his father in taking over the world. One of my main gripes with multiverse plotlines is the concept of there being infinite different realities, thus meaning there are infinite possibilities and literally everything exists within the said multiverse. And while this could be true for Invincible, the theory I like to run with that I think makes the story more impactful, and has some grounds for being true, is that there is a finite number of other dimensions. When Angstrom is building his machine with the help of the Muller twins, he specifically gathers 999 other versions of himself, 10 machines that house 100 Angstroms each. Obviously, the counter-argument can be that 1000 is just a logical place to call it quits if there are infinite versions of himself. And Yeah, sure. But if we go with the theory that there are 1,000 or slightly more dimensions, it entirely recontextualizes the Invincible War and a very specific line uttered by Angstrom himself. Remember that world-changing battle between Omni-Man and Invincible a month ago? In most other dimensions, they teamed up and took over the planet. So in most other dimensions, Invincible is a villain. Most other dimensions implies that he is also good in some others. But the thing is, in 100 of 100 scenarios where Invincible stands up to Omni-Man, he dies. There is no reality where a teenage Mark beats Nolan in a one-on-one. The only reason our Invincible lived was because he managed to appeal to the minuscule amount of empathy that rubbed off on Omni-Man during his time on Earth. And sure, we can get into semantics and say maybe in another dimension the original Guardians of the Globe are still alive and take down Nolan. But personally, I don't think any version of Omni-Man would drop the ball that hard. The main reason our Invincible even stood up to Omni-Man and fought for Earth was because of how involved Debbie was in raising him. In Season 2, Episode 4, we get an intimate scene between Art and Debbie, where she recounts what it was like raising Mark, how Nolan was very often absent saving the world, while she had to pick up the slack. Whilst a lot of what I'm talking about is heavily influenced by having read the comics, one of the best changes with the adaptation was how fleshed out Debbie became. She is a pillar of empathy and humanity and is very clearly the reason Mark didn't fall down the alt-right Viltrumite pipeline. Whilst in many other dimensions, Mark probably got his powers much sooner and was easier to indoctrinate by his father. There's a line Debbie says to Angstrom in the Season 2 finale that I think sums up this concept. She says, "Oh, that's why you're so angry, because you turned out rotten here, and Mark is the hero for once." This line is interesting to me because it not only gives a reason as to why the multiverse arc is so interesting, but it recontextualizes the entire show. It gives us a reason as to why our Mark is the most interesting version of the character to be following. Our Mark defied all odds. Not only did he stand up to his father, but he lived. Our Mark makes mistakes. He's selfish, he's short-tempered, and he's clearly more human than Viltrumite in all the ways that matter. And there's no place we see that more than the Invincible War. All the different versions of him relish in killing, while our Mark has a whole identity crisis over the thought that he had killed someone, even when that someone was a certified bad guy who broke his mother's arm and threatened his family. And even outside of these implications, the Invincible War on its own is such a cool concept, using the multiverse as a way of tarnishing Invincible's reputation and image, rather than just outright trying to kill him, but then also using it as an additional mirror to hold up to Mark, showing him his true nature, giving him this internal identity crisis. Maybe my Invincible bias is showing a little throughout this video, but I can't help but point out how cool of a concept it is that, with this interpretation, it feels more impactful having this be an underdog story, where against all odds, Invincible tries to be good. And also I just think that when a multiverse aspect gets introduced and it's implied there are infinite realities, it feels like the whole story feels less meaningful. Also, they just announced a 3v3 Invincible tag fighter by former Killer Instinct devs. I am beyond hyped for this. If Battle Beast isn't in the day one roster, I will be distraught. Anyway, go read Invincible if you haven't, or if you are avoiding spoilers for the show, go read Invincible Universe Battle Beast. It includes no spoilers for the show, confirmed by Robert Kirkman himself, and takes place in between Season 1 when Battle Beast dipped, and when he shows up again in Season 3 on the Viltrumite prison ship. It's one issue in, but it's peak so far. Thanks for watching.